Have you ever wanted to experience what it's like to be on the run in the Star Wars galaxy, being chased down and hunted not only by the Empire, but some of the nastiest factions imaginable? Well, Star Wars Outlaws gives you that exact experience. I'm probably more excited for this game than any other game in 2024, and not only because it's a Star Wars game, and I obviously love Star Wars games, but because it's an open world Star Wars game. It's going to allow you to freely explore several planets and be hunted by the Empire.
The Empire's pretty chill.
I just got to play Star Wars Outlaws for the first time ever, and this game really surprised me in a few ways. I want to use the word refreshing here. Let me explain. I got to spend about an hour with the game, played 3 separate missions over the course of the 60 minutes, and unfortunately in this time didn't get to explore the open world, but definitely got a sense of what this game is about. There are some real standout mechanics here, some stuff that really surprised me, but also things I'm still skeptical about. Also, unfortunately, I wasn't able to capture any of my own footage, so all the footage in this video is B-roll that was provided by Ubisoft. But I will be showing you all of the missions I played, plus some extra footage, and I also got to interview a couple of the developers from Massive Entertainment. I asked them about the game and then also did a bit of a rapid fire thing. I'm going to include some of the interview in this video, but if you want to see the full interview, I've posted that over on my Clips channel, so you can go check that out there. Huge thanks to Ubisoft for inviting me out to LA and making all of this possible. Hey everyone, it's Andrew. Now I think I have to begin by acknowledging some of the controversy here. Yes, in recent times, Ubisoft don't necessarily have the best rep. But what I will say, after being at this event, getting to meet some of the developers, and also getting hands on the game with myself, it is so clear how passionate they are not only about Star Wars, but about the game they've built here. Several times while playing, the word cinematic came to mind. There were so many moments that made you feel like you were in Star Wars, experiencing Star Wars from the perspective of Kay Vess. She, in a lot of ways, is experiencing this world for the first time, and that is the experience Ubisoft wanted to give you with this game. It's also not only supposed to be for veteran Star Wars fans. They wanted to give an experience to newcomers, to experience Star Wars for the first time. And you definitely get a bit of a sense of that, but in a good way. The game truly does a great job of making you feel like you're living in this era of Star Wars, on the run, and trying to survive as a scoundrel. The game is set just after The Empire Strikes Back, so apart from the destruction of the Death Star, the Empire are pretty much at the height of their powers. You can definitely feel their presence policing these worlds as you go about your business. So let's talk about gameplay, and one thing that really surprised me was the space combat. I was super skeptical about this, considering it's not necessarily a space game. This is an open world exploration Star Wars third-person action-adventure game. But during my hour time with the game, I've spent about 10 minutes in the Trailblazer, and it really surprised me. It was way better than I was expecting, and I'd say about on par with Battlefront 2's Starfighter Assault style gameplay. It definitely has an arcade feel to it and isn't anywhere near the sim-style Starfighter gameplay of Star Wars Squadrons, for example. You still have a great amount of freedom, different weapons. You can manually roll your ship, spin it all the way around, just like Anakin. And the Trailblazer feels like it has a weight to it, kind of similar to the Millennium Falcon. I did also test crashing it, of course. I don't have footage, but you can imagine it went something like this. So like I said, there is a bit of controversy surrounding this game, and part of it has to do with the fact that some people think every Star Wars game needs lightsabers, which I disagree with, but I thought I'd ask the developers about this.
We have had some wonderful properties in Star Wars that told the Jedi story, that talked about the Sith, that, you know, you got to experience the rebellion, for example. And I think when we landed on the scoundrel fantasy and wanting to tell a scoundrel story with Kay, it was actually really exciting was, hey, this is a person on the ground that has no control over what's happening above.
Now, considering you're not playing as a lightsaber-wielding maniac, the developers had to find some different ways to make combat feel engaging and have more variety, and they've done this using Kay Vess's blaster and also Nick's. This is one of the gameplay elements I was quite skeptical about, but I honestly found it quite fun using Kay Vess's blaster, and not only that, but finding weapons in the world to pick up. As you make your way through each level, and I'm not sure if this is the case also in the open world, but it likely will be, you'll be able to come across different limited use weapons. For example, there are sniper rifles, there are E11s, there's a rotary blaster, here, there are thermal detonators, and picking these up, even only just for a few moments, really adds some variety to gameplay, but also forces you to be more strategic. You see, you're not playing as an all-powerful Jedi or Sith Lord.
You've taken everything from me!
And stealth is a major part of combat in Star Wars Outlaws. There were times just playing these 3 missions, which were set early in the game, I was struggling because it's a lot trickier than you might think, having only a blaster at your disposal and kind of having to make your way around the environment sneakily so that you're not just facing 10 enemies all at once. And this also goes hand in hand with the variety in enemy types. For example, some enemies you'll need to use your ion blaster attachment to take down because they have a shield or they're a droid and they'll be completely immune to regular shots. It's fast switching between these, and there are other customization options for your blaster which I think make it fire faster or in different bursts, or other different upgrades that add several different abilities to your blaster. But switching between these and planning your fights really made fighting and combat strategic, much more than I was anticipating. This isn't a run and gun style Star Wars game because you simply don't have that power or that amount of health to be able to do so. Enemies will kill you in a few shots if you're not careful. But luckily for you, you've got one of the cutest companions in probably all of Star Wars history on your side. This is Nix. Aww. And Nix has a few different abilities. Not only can Nix be used to distract enemies, but he can also run over to a stormtrooper and activate a grenade on their belt and then run away and watch as they hilariously explode. Nix can also set traps and go and fetch you weapons if you're too far away to get them yourself. And once again, this adds variety and more strategy to the combat. You do kind of have to be stealthy, moving your way around. So it's interesting having a companion like Nix available to you in combat. Quite different to how BD-1 works in Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor as well. As a comparison, BD-1 doesn't really get involved in combat unless you're hacking a droid, for example, who then turns to your side. Nix, however, in Star Wars Outlaws can be used in more creative ways, to create distractions, to make your way around these little mini maps and figure out the best way to take down a group of enemies. I was also using the melee combat quite a bit. If you got too close to a stormtrooper and just needed to beat them up, you can do that. You can also sneak attack them from behind, and sometimes this felt like more of a relief than actually just having to shoot everyone with your blaster and not knowing if you're going to be outgunned and then be killed lying dead on the ground and Nix is crying over you because you were companions and you're gone. A bit more about the gun gameplay. I found it really enjoyable watching some of the animations Kayvas would perform when mid-combat. For example, after you'd slide, you could shoot from a different position. She was holding the blaster from seemingly a different spot all the time, and it felt quite organic and like there was a real flow to the way she uses this weapon. And I guess these smooth animations add to the sense of stealth, just sneaking your way around the battlefield and around the Star Wars galaxy. During combat, you're also able to perform a bit of a time dilation quick draw, which is based on a meter that charges after you've defeated enemies. And this is definitely handy for getting yourself out of a situation where you're facing more than one enemy at once. The only thing is you need to use it sparingly because you won't have this available at any time you like. Now, unfortunately, there was only a very brief moment where I got to ride Kayvas's speeder bike. It seems like this is going to be a core gameplay mechanic and is actually stored on the Trailblazer. So if you land your ship on a planet, your bike will basically be in the back of the ship and you can ride the bike straight out. Like I said, I wasn't able to explore the open world. I did give it a little ride around in one of these smaller city locations though, on Toshara, which is the main planet in the game. And I can definitely see how this is going to be a core gameplay mechanic and will be so much fun to just go exploring around these open worlds. Even around the little area I drove it in, it felt fluid and fun and like you can shift left and right. Puzzle solving was also something I wasn't really anticipating being a big part of Star Wars Outlaws, and not that it's a big part, but it's definitely part of the game. And I really enjoyed this one where you're basically lockpicking, but it's based on a musical timer. You're basically following the beat and need to replicate the beat using your controller or keyboard to unlock the door. There's also another style of puzzle which was repeated throughout the gameplay involving shapes and a bit of trial and error to create a correct sequence. Now, I'm personally not the biggest fan of these style of puzzles in video games just because I feel like they can interrupt the flow of gameplay, but these ones honestly weren't too bad and I did enjoy the musical timing one. I tried performing this in real life when I found a similar kind of console and lockpicking thing using my finger, but unfortunately nothing unlocked. Very disappointing. Now, one of the biggest things I'm excited for in Star Wars Outlaws is the wanted system, being chased down by the Empire and having to somehow escape. I experienced this in a small way during the space combat, but it wasn't necessarily because of something I'd done of my own accord. It was because of the mission we'd been on. We were infiltrating an Imperial base, we'd made our escape, and then had to shoot down a bunch of TIE fighters, and then also activate this beacon, which removed our wanted level. I asked the developers about the wanted system in the game, as it's something that's new to Star Wars games. I don't believe there's been any other Star Wars game that's had a wanted system and asked them about their inspiration behind creating this and how they wanted it to feel.
In the example of the wanted system, we're right in that pocket in between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Fantastic era for us.
Yeah.
And that's the height of Imperial power, almost. Right? So, of course, we felt like surrounding like an umbrella, all of this navigating the syndicates, the spinning plates of, opportunity and threat, ebb and flow of the factions, the syndicates and the reputation you have with them. The Empire is always there. They're the space cops. If you break the rules, they're gonna come after you.
Now, I also just want to talk about the scenery and world design. Star Wars Outlaws is without a doubt one of the best looking Star Wars games ever created. Star Wars Outlaws has been developed in the Snowdrop engine, which is the same engine used for the Division games and also for Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, which I played last year. And if there's one thing the Avatar game did so well, it was the world design, the immersion in the world of Avatar. Everything felt so real and alive. And you can definitely see inspiration of that here. Like I said, I think there'll be more of this in the open world when we get to explore that later on when the game releases, but you definitely still got a sense of the stunning scenery and surrounds and immersion in this Star Wars world in the missions I was able to play. Everything just feels kind of alive, whether it's seeing the creatures in the sky on Tashara, to the cold snowy streets of Kijimi, the way the snow sits on Kay's jacket as she moves through this world, the footsteps, the wind, even noticing the cold air coming from characters' mouths at times, their breath. It's small details like this that just make the game feel so much more livable, believable, and like this is a living, breathing world. Does Darth Vader breathe in the cold? Like, can you see mist coming out of his mouth? Is that a thing? With the time I had with Star Wars Outlaws, it still feels like I was only scraping the surface of this game. The open world is just waiting there to be explored, and honestly that's the biggest thing I'm excited for here, as I'm sure a lot of you are. After all, this is supposedly the first true open world Star Wars game. That said, I will say there is an animation that plays between space and ground. You can't just fly straight down onto the planet, which would be, I guess, kind of ridiculous. It's not No Man's Sky style of gameplay. These are fully existing, pre-rendered animated worlds. There's no random generation going on here, so I guess that style of space to ground that's just completely native and no cutscene plays would be a little too challenging to achieve from a developer standpoint, although hopefully one day that becomes a reality. That said, going from space to ground, there was also an option to skip the cutscene, which I guess is kind of a loading screen for the planet to load or for space to load. But I think when you're in the open world here, it's still going to feel native and organic enough that it will eventually end up feeling seamless. Now, all that said, I'm definitely still a little skeptical about Star Wars Outlaws. We still don't really know all that much about the story and Kay Vess's character and her surrounding world. We know she's going after one of the biggest heists in the history of the galaxy, or that she's ever attempted anyway, and that the reputation system involves you choosing different sides and getting different benefits depending on whether or not you side with each of the different clans. Like, for example, the Hutts and the new in-game Ashiga clan. Even though there were some cutscenes that played during my time with the game, they were kind of out of context, and it's kind of hard to give a gauge on whether I'm going to enjoy this story or not. I think, however, I'm definitely going to enjoy exploring the world of Star Wars, which is what this game is all about. I'm honestly really looking forward to seeing more of Outlaws, but I'd love to know what you think of Star Wars Outlaws. Are you excited for this game? Are you going to play it when it comes out? Let me know in the comments. Huge thanks again to Ubisoft for this entire experience, for letting me play the game early. I really appreciate it. And I've shared more from my time in LA and my experience at the Star Wars Outlaws event on my Instagram, so come follow me there at Bombastic, also on Twitter, Discord, and TikTok. And thanks for watching this. My name's Andrew. I'll catch you soon.